Good morning, students, and welcome to another read and discussion of one of our readings this unit, Edgar Allan Poe's The Telltale Heart. And before we begin, let's go ahead and have a pun of the day. The yoga clinic is hiring. There are many positions available. Indeed. And so far this week we've read about The Mask of the Red Death and The Raven. Another very famous work by Edgar Allan Poe's The Telltale Heart. One word to keep in mind as we go along here is paranoia. Paranoia is a very important word to keep in mind for this story. Weird might be another one, but that's with everything in Poe's writings. Paranoia specifically here. Let's go ahead and dive in and see where things go. True. Very, very dreadfully nervous I had been and am. But why will you say that I am mad? The disease had sharpened my senses, not destroyed, not dulled them. Above all was the sense of hearing acute. I heard all things in the heaven and in the earth. I heard many things in hell. How then am I mad? Hearken and observe how healthily, how calmly I can tell you the whole story. So yes, he's not mad. I mean, he said so, so it must be true. It is impossible to say how the idea entered my brain, but once conceived, it haunted me day and night. The object, there was none. Passion, there was none. I loved the old man. He had never wronged me. He had never given me insult. Told I had desire. It was his eye. Yes, it was this. He had the eye of a vulture, a pale blue eye with a film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold. And so by degrees, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man, and thus rid myself of the eye forever. Again, he's not insane. He said so. Now this is the point. You fancy me mad. Madmen know nothing. But you should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded. So he's not insane because he did it wisely, intelligently. Yeah. With what caution, with what foresight, with what dissimulation I went to work. I was never kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him. And every night, about midnight, I turned the latch of his door and opened it, oh, so gently. And then, when I had made an opening sufficient for my head, I put in a dark lantern, all closed, that no light shone out. And then I thrust in my head. Oh, you would have laughed to see how cunningly I thrust it in. Would we have laughed? Laughed at this guy going to kill this other guy? I don't know about that, but I moved it slowly, very, very slowly, so that I might not disturb the old man's sleep. It took me an hour to place my whole head within the opening, so far that I could see him as he lay upon his bed. Imagine you are in your bed and you're partially awake, watching someone peek their head into your door slowly over the course of an hour. I think if that's all they did, it would still be so darn creepy. That's creepy all by itself. Ha! Madman has so wide. And then, when my head was well in the room, I undid the lantern cautiously, oh, so cautiously, for the hinges creaked. I undid it just so much that a single thin ray fell upon the vulture eye. And this I did eat for 7 long nights. Every night, just at midnight, but I found the eye always closed, and so it was impossible to do the work, for it was not the old man who vexed me, but his evil eye. And every morning when the day broke, I went boldly into the chamber, and spoke courageously to him, calling him by name in a hearty tone, inquiring how he had passed the night. So you see, he would have been a very profound old man indeed to suspect that every night, just at 12, I looked in upon him while he slept. But he's not insane. Upon the 8th night, I was more than usually cautious in opening the door. A watch's minute hand moves more quickly than mine did. Never more than night had I felt the extent of my own powers, of my sagacity. I could scarcely contain my feelings of triumph to think that there I was, opening the door little by little, and he not even to dream of my secret deeds or thoughts. I fairly chuckled at the idea, and perhaps he heard me, for he moved on the bed suddenly, as if startled. Now you may think that I drew back, but no. His room was as black as pitch with a thick darkness, for the shutters were close fastened through fear of robbers. And so I knew that he could not see the opening of the door, and I kept pushing it on steadily, steadily. I had my head in and was about to open the lantern when the thumb slipped upon the tin fastening, and the old man sprang up in bed, crying out, "Who's there?" I kept quite still and said nothing. For a whole hour I did not move a muscle. Then, in the meantime, I did not hear him lie down. He was still sitting up in the bed, listening, just as I have done, night after night, hearkening to the death watches in the wall. Presently I heard a slight groan, and I knew it was the groan of mortal terror. It was not a groan of pain or grief, oh no. It was the low, stifled sound that arises from the bottom of my soul, of the soul when overcharged with awe. I knew the sound well. Many a night, just at midnight, when all the world slept, it has welled up from my own bosom, deepening and with its dreadful echo, the terrors that distracted me. I say I knew it well. I knew what the old man felt and pitied him, although I chuckled at heart. I knew that he had been lying awake ever since the first slight noise. When he had turned in the bed, his fears had been ever since growing upon him. He had been trying to fancy them causeless, but could not. He had been saying to himself, "It is nothing but the wind in the chimney. It is only a mouse crossing the floor, or it is merely a cricket which has made a single chirp." Yes, he had been trying to comfort himself with these suppositions, but he had found all in vain, because death is approaching him. In approaching him had stalked with his black shadow before him, and enveloped the victim. And it was the mournful influence of the unperceived shadow that caused him to feel, although he neither saw nor heard, to feel the presence of my head within the room. Notice also that death is listed with a capital letter, so it's being personified here. Death is an abstract. In really. When I had waited a long time, very patiently, without hearing him lie down, I resolved to open a very, very little crevice in the lantern. So I opened it. You cannot imagine how stealthily, until at length a simple dim ray, like the thread of a spider, shot from the crevice and fell full upon the vulture eye. was open, wide open, and I grew furious as I gazed upon it. I saw it with perfect distinctness, all in dull blue, with a hideous veil over it that chilled the very marrow in my bones. But I could see nothing else of the old man's face or person, for I directed the ray as if by instinct precisely upon that darn spot. I wonder why he doesn't notice if there's a ray of light on his eye. My theory is that with the eye sort of clouded over and light colored like it is, that he's probably blind in that eye. That's my guess. And have I not told you that what you mistake for madness is but over acuteness of the sense? So, guys, if you readers, if you think the narrator is insane, no, he's not insane. He's just got good senses. He can see and smell really well. That's our mistake, really. Now I say there came to my ears a low, dull, quick sound, such as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. Does that make a sound? I knew that sound well, too. It was the beating of the old man's heart. You can hear a man's heart beating from across the room. So either he has extra special senses like he claims, or we need to pull out another one or two psychological terms here. Hallucinations would be the one I would go to first. Hallucinations. Auditory hallucinations. He believes he can hear a guy's heart from a room away. Chances are it's all in his head. And considering the story so far, I think we have a lot of evidence to suggest that this guy's insane. So, not surprising. It increased my fury as the beating of a drum stimulates the soldier into courage. By the way, guys, auditory hallucinations, while a symptom of various things, is definitely a symptom of schizophrenia. Schizophrenia, which is often confused in pop culture with multiple personality disorder. These are not the same thing. Schizophrenia is not multiple personalities. It's a very, very serious disorder, which often includes auditory or visual hallucinations, catatonia or fugue state, delusions of grandeur, can include paranoia, any number of things like that. Look it up on the internet and have fun with that. I'm just doing this from memory from last time I had a college class. I know that was a long time ago. But look it up, read about it. Fun stuff. Fun, I mean weird, but interesting. All right. But even yet I refrained and kept still. I scarcely breathed. I held the lantern motionless. I tried how steadily I could maintain the ray upon the eye. Seems to be a typo. It says Eve, but it's supposed to be I. Meantime, the hellish tattoo of the heart increased. The first time I've heard the word tattoo used to mean a noise. That's weird. It grew quicker and louder every instant. The old man's terror must have been extreme. It grew louder, I say, louder every moment. Do you mark me well? I have told you that I am nervous. So I am. Maybe he's hearing his own heart, actually. And now at the dead hour of the night, amid the dreadful silence of that old house, so strange a noise as this excited me to uncontrollable terror. Yet for some minutes longer I refrained and stood still. But the beating grew louder. I thought the heart must burst. And now a new anxiety seized me. The sound would be heard by a neighbor. The old man's hour had come. With a loud yell, I threw open the lantern, leapt into the room. He shrieked once only. In an instant, I dragged him to the floor and pulled the heavy bed over him. I then smiled gaily to find the deed so far done. But for many minutes, the heart beat on with a muffled sound. This, however, did not vex me. It would not be heard through the wall. At length it ceased. The old man was dead. I removed the bed and examined the corpse. Yes, he was stone dead. I placed my hand upon the heart and held it there many minutes. There was no pulsation. He was stone dead. His eye would trouble me no more. Notice he kills the guy, but did still hear his heart a bit there after he was dead. Again, he's not putting his ear to the guy's chest. He's hearing it from multiple feet away. So the sound probably still auditory hallucination. Notice that he is able to hallucinate it even after the guy is dead. That's an important point. If still you think me mad, you will think so no longer when I describe the wise precautions I took for the concealment of the body. So he's not insane. I mean, he murdered a guy and hallucinates things, but he's not insane because he hid the body very well. He was very smart and good about it, or so he claims. So, sure, yeah. First of all, I dismember the corpse. Yeah, he's not insane. I cut off the head and the arms and the legs. This is normal stuff people do all the time. I then took up 3 planks from the flooring of the chamber and deposited all between the scalings. I then replaced the floorboards so cleverly, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. There was nothing to wash out, no stain of any kind, no spot whatever. I had been too wary for that. A tub had caught all. Ha ha. So yes, he claims to have been such a genius hiding the body that he hid it in his own house or in his own building because they share some sort of apartment complex or something. Doesn't sound like a bright method of hiding a body, but then again, I've probably watched too many crime shows. When I had made an end of these labors, it was 4 o'clock, still dark as midnight. As the bell sounded the hour, there came a knocking at the street door. I went down to open it with a light heart, for what had I now to fear? There entered 3 men, who introduced themselves with perfect suavity as officers of the police. A shriek had been heard by a neighbor during the night. Suspicion of foul play had been aroused. Information had been lodged at the police office, and they, the officers, had been deputed to search the premises. I smiled, for what had I to fear? I bade the gentleman welcome. The shriek, I said, was my own in a dream. The old man, I mentioned, was absent in the country. I took my visitors all over the house. I bade them search well. I led them at length to his chamber. I showed them his treasures, secured, undisturbed. In the enthusiasm of my confidence, I brought chairs into the room and desired them here to rest from their fatigues, while I myself, in the wild audacity of my perfect triumph, placed my own seat upon the very spot beneath which reposed the corpse of the victim. The officers were satisfied. My manner had convinced them. I was singularly at ease. They sat, and while I answered cheerily, they chatted of familiar things. But ere long, I felt myself getting pale and wished them gone. My head ached, and I fancied a ringing in my ears. Remember, auditory hallucinations. But they still sat and still chatted. The ringing became more distinct. It continued and became more distinct. I talked more freely to get rid of the feeling, but it continued and gained definiteness until at length I found that the noise was not within my ears. No doubt I now grew very pale, but I talked more fluently and with a heightened voice. Yet the sound increased, and what could I do? It was a low, dull, quick sound. Much, much such a sound as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. Second time he uses that simile. I gasped for breath, and yet the officers heard it not. I talked more quickly, more vehemently, but the noise steadily increased. I rose and argued about trifles. in a high key and with violent gesticulations. So the officers are probably noticing by now, if they haven't already, that this guy's nuts. But the noise steadily increased. Why would they not be gone? I paced the floor to and fro with heavy strides, as if excited to fury by the observations of the men. But the noise steadily increased. Oh God, what could I do? I foamed, I raved, I swore, I swung the chair upon which I had been sitting and grated it upon the boards. But the noise arose over all and continually increased. It was louder, 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 and still the men chatted pleasantly and smiled. Chatted pleasantly and smiled. So he's saying he slammed his chair on the floor and flailed around like a maniac, and the cops are still chatting and smiling. If any of this had happened, they would not be chatting and smiling. That doesn't make sense. He's either hallucinating what he's doing or what they're doing. I don't know which. Perhaps both. Let's see. Was it possible they heard not? Almighty God, no, no, they heard, they suspected, they knew. They were making a mockery of my horror. This I thought, and this I think. But anything was better than this agony. Anything was more tolerable than this derision. I could bear those hypocritical smiles no longer. I felt that I must scream or die. And now, again, hark, louder, 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 louder. Villains, I shrieked. Dissemble no more. I admit the deed. Tear up the planks. Hear, hear. It is the beating of his hideous heart. So, as I said at the beginning, paranoia is a factor in this story. Part of the nameless narrator's ailment here, part of his schizophrenia, is some serious paranoia. And it causes him to think that the police know about his crime, even when they don't. They do not know he's done this. They have not given any such signs, but he thinks they have. And he thinks they have, and he thinks they have, harder and harder, grows more and more paranoid that they know that they can hear a dead guy's heart beating under the floorboards. Combine that with his auditory hallucinations of actually hearing the heart when the dude's dead, lead to him confessing his crime and telling them where the body is. So he was going to get away with it, but his own ailments, which led to the murder in the first place, led to him confessing at the end. So interesting stuff there, interesting exploration of madness. And this story is a good transition into next week's readings, actually, because next week we're going to be looking at horror, American horror stories, which were heavily influenced by the works of Edgar Allan Poe and other dark romantic and gothic writers, and works by such authors as Robert W. Chambers and H.P. Lovecraft definitely focus on madness in their horror. So we're going to read a lot about that next week. But go ahead and answer your study guide questions, fill those out, send me questions if you have any, and take care.